today's session is something that I feel very passionately about. I believe technology can do so much more than improve someone's life. It can support differently abled, it can empower women, and it can educate our children to make a larger contribution to our society. I came across this quote recently by George Couros, and he says technology is not just a tool, it can give learners a voice that they may not have had before. And I have a great panel today to take them through some conversation and learn from them and get inspired. Our three panelists are inspiring, they are change makers and doing everything they can to create an inclusive society by using technology innovatively. So give me some time to introduce them to you, and I'll be very quick. Our first panelist, Dr. Kalika Bali, is the principal researcher at Microsoft Research India, a linguistic professor turned speech technologist. Her work at Microsoft Research is about understanding, processing, and generating code mixed language data for text and speech. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Ms. Sairee Chahal, founder and CEO of Shiro's. I'm a great fan of hers. I love the work that she does. A community platform. She's created a community platform for women, offering support, resources, opportunities, and interaction via shiros.com. She's credited with building up women at work and future of conversation of work in India, besides building a strong technology play to solve problems of gender disparity in India, which we really need. Last but not the least, Dr. David Chesney, a warm welcome to you, sir, a lecturer and research investigator at University of Michigan. He has won multiple teaching awards and was involved in the formation of a multidisciplinary design minor in the College of Engineering. He was also involved in formation of an internal center to create hardware and software for children with cognitive and physical disabilities through a collaboration between the College of Engineering and C.S. Motkal Children's Hospital. A very warm welcome, and thank you so much for taking out your precious time to be with us and to inspire us. So to start off the conversation, maybe you all can share briefly with us the work that you do, and why do you do what you do? What inspires you? And if you're working currently on a project that you would like to share with us that would give us a better understanding, we would love to learn more about it. So maybe we can start with Dr. Bali, if that's all right.
Thank you. Thank you for the welcome. I'm so happy to be here. So to start off with why I do what I do, it's been so long I've been doing this. It's been a long time since I've had the chance to sit back and think why I do what I do. But I think it's because I really am fascinated fascinated with languages, how humans use languages to practically do everything, right? Like if we didn't have language, how would we live? We can't even imagine how we'd live without a language, right? And then how can technology help assist humans across various languages? How can it be possible that somebody who knows Tamil can talk to somebody who knows Bahasa Indonesia, can talk to somebody who knows Fijian? So how do we make this communication across these languages possible with the help of technology? And that's the reason why I do what I do, because I really, really do believe that technology is a very powerful tool. It can be used for good. It can be used for not so good things also. But when it is used for good, it can really empower communities and make things accessible to them, which they might not have even thought would be accessible to them. So one of the things that I do work on, I know you mentioned code switching, but that's just one thing that I work on. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about is how to help people with who live in marginalized communities, who speak languages that are not the mainstream languages, and nobody's really worried about them. So everyone's worried about English and French and German, and in India, Hindi. But nobody is really worried about, the smaller languages, and they're smaller only in terms of the resources that are available to them, and not small in terms of the number of people who speak them, right? So, if it is Gondi, for example, in India, half the people, I'm sure even here amongst the students who are attending this, would not even know where Gondi is spoken, and may not have even heard that there is a language called Gondi in India. And, over 1 million people use it. So how can we build all this technology that we have access to, speaking these mainstream languages, for people who speak these languages as well? So it's a project called Project Elora, and that's what I am currently very passionate about. Well, currently I'm working on it. I'm passionate about it from a long time. So
It
I'll stop
sounds
here. Thank
very
you.
fascinating and inspiring, I have to say. I think most of the time, you say lost in transition. So, it's something like that. Sari, can I request you to sort of take on those three questions?
Right.
If you remember them.
Yeah, I'll try my best. Thank you, first of all, for having me here. It's always good to be back at Plaksha, and I think there's a lot of resonance with what you guys are doing. Uh, so, look, I think the premise of work we do is very, very simple. We believe that, India, we're a country of dichotomies. We're the country with the largest gender gap in the world, but we're also the country with the second largest internet population in the world. So I think there's something, to double click there. And the work we do is actually very simple. We are just saying that internet can mean a lot more for women in a country where social barriers are very, very high. Social barriers, both in terms of access of, let's say, financial capital, access to just their own voices, and of course, mobility, social mobility, as well as mobility in every which way. So we believe technology is the biggest enabler in our times, and our smartphones, our devices, we all love. So why can't that be magical, or why can't that be game changing for a lot of women out there who are kind of invisible? They're there, but they're kind of, and in fact, one of the most interesting things that's happened in India is a lot of work around women was historically very grassroots, which meant that if you were setting up a charity or an NGO, you would go to rural India. And then, of course, there's a lot of talk around diversity, which happens, let's say, in the corporate sector. But guess what? There are almost 200 million women who are kind of urban, peri-urban, educated, semi-educated, maybe self-employed, micro-entrepreneurs. And these are the 200 million invisible women. No policy really talks to them, and now, because they are all connected online, it's game changing for them. So the work we do falls under primarily four things. One is using internet as a means of support. So it is as a social network platform. So women come in, it's a safe space, but that coming into the safe space opens a lot of opportunities. It's like how coming to Plaksha opens a lot of opportunities, or going to a Gymkhana club opens a lot of opportunities, which are social in nature. And second is access to employment, entrepreneurial opportunities, and now slowly access to capital. So everything that you need to move up the social graph and the financial graph in your life could be found in one place. And that's exactly what we're building.
But what inspired you to do this? I mean, where did this idea come from?
Well,
and why?
So look, I'm one of those 200 million women. My childhood was not very, it was great, but it wasn't extraordinary. I come from one of these families. There's a movie I quote all the time. It's called Bareilly Ki Barfi. So it's set in Bareilly. There's a mom and a daughter, and there's nothing extraordinary, but the vibe is that everybody wants to do well in life, and everybody sort of wants to also keep keep their context, and I think here we are at a time. So a lot of my generation of women ended up doing something because we were the outliers. We had to move out of our context. We had to actually break barriers and say, I'll leave my past behind and I will sort of set up something new. But 200 million women can't do that. So let us sort of bring development to them where they are, right, in their own context, in the life they love, in the country they were born in. So I think a little bit of that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and being so honest about that. Dr. Chesney, can I request you to address us?
Sure, absolutely. First, thanks for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here. So the first part of the question was kind of what do we do? And what we do is pretty straightforward, where we take interesting new technology. So whatever is the newest, greatest technology that students are interested in. We combine that with some kind of interesting, either specific need of an individual or a clinical need identified from our hospital. So it could be a child with cerebral palsy who only has fine motor skills in their right two toes. It could be somebody who's visually impaired and has memory loss and can't remember where they put their clothes away in the closet. And so building a smart closet that remembers where clothes are put and what shelves are on. So that's kind of the melding, the marriage of interesting technology and specific needs. So that's the what. The why, or the motivation, is actually, frankly, pretty simple. My life is blessed by being the father of 3 daughters. And so with being the father of 3 daughters, I always, I grew up as their dad trying to figure out, it's like, how can I get them interested in both giving back to community and interest in technology? So that's really the catalyst, is just, of just chatting with them and working with them as they grew up into adulthood. And then some of the current projects. You asked about some of the current projects. One of them is actually on everybody's mobile phone that I'm talking to right now. This came right out of the class. And it's, if you dig deeply in the accessibility options on all of your cell phones, there's all of these different options. You can make text bigger or smaller, change a contrast, change a color, change things. At least one of those came from work in my classes. And so it's like, that's kind of the where these things go, or where they lead to. Other projects that we worked on are related to, I mentioned the smart closet. There was a project that we worked on. A young man wanted to, with cerebral palsy, who only had fine motor skills in his right 2 toes, wanted to fly a drone. So we built a drone, built a control mechanism, mounted an iPad down by his right foot so he could drag his toes around and fly the drone around the room. We also do work with augmented reality and pediatric surgery. So those are just some of the projects that we work on. There's, on my website, there's a bunch of videos. I didn't know whether there would be time. I assumed there wouldn't, but there's videos and I can send a link to that if anybody's interested. But it goes through a bunch of these stories, and there's videos and very nice stories about some of these projects.
Wow, that would be very interesting. Actually, it would be lovely if you could. A follow-up question to what you just said. A lot of your work is around assistive technology, right? And you work with your students to come up with these projects. How do you involve your students to work on these high impact projects, and how do you sort of ignite that spark in them? And there are some educators who are sitting here, teachers, and it'll be very interesting to get that insight. How do you make children think of these big projects that could change someone's life?
So the simplest way that I've found is to get the individuals who have the needs actually involved in the classroom. Okay, so the one video that I have queued up, it's a 4-minute video, and like I said, I don't necessarily want to take time out of this wonderful presentation, but it is worth seeing. And what came to mind the first time Grace came into the classroom, I realized that the students were infinitely motivated by her, and there was no motivation that I needed to provide whatsoever. They met Grace. she just inspired them. And then I could just move over to the side of the classroom and Grace did the teaching. And that's a wonderful thing. They were asking Grace questions about what type of tools do you need? What will work best for you? And so, I provided the technology. Grace provided the knowledge and the inspiration.
Fabulous. I actually haven't seen the video. I know I went onto your page and it did mention there, but I think it'll be worth having a look at that. My question to I know Sairee, you need to leave early. My next question is that I think pandemic has made work at home a reality for everybody. I think accessibility technology has become a way of life now. Has it sort of put any sort of roadblock for your work going forward? And do you think this is going to be something that would help women who have to juggle so many other commitments, that work at home will become a way to enable many more to join the workforce?
Absolutely. So I think because of the pandemic, obviously, not only remote work has become universal, but there were certain, I would like to call them short-term roadblocks. I think there was a time when everybody was in lockdown, children were at home, and I think for women, the amount of work they had to do just kind of was enormous. And I think that was the time for huge amount of anxiety. And I think in some families, of course, we run a helpline, so our requests for help against abuse and domestic violence went up. But having said that, I think if I take a slightly longish view, let's say 2 years to 5 years kind of view, we've historically run a remote work business, okay? And it's very simple. Women are certified as remote workers. They basically set themselves up as remote workers. They set up a home office. And this story is like 2 years, 3 years ago, this business. But this business always had like a little bit of resistance from everyone to say, hey, how do I know work can get done from home? And, our sales cycles were small. And so we had about 10,000 women on this bench, okay, before the pandemic. And by the time this year finishes, will be 100,000 women on that bench who are remote workers. So I think this year has been watershed in every way, because thanks to acceptance of remote workers, I think a lot more women will come into the economic mainstream, and not only as remote workers, but also as micro entrepreneurs, self-employed professionals, online creators. I think there's a whole big trend. Just to give you some top level statistics, there are about 15 million women who are solo entrepreneurs in this country. They're micro entrepreneurs, basically. They're a one-man shop or a one-man business, one woman business rather. And occasionally they employ another one. So there are about 30 million women employed in this mini economy. And our estimates say that in about 2 to 3 years, this number will become like at least 3x. So this pandemic is kind of, it's uncorking the lid on a lot of opportunities that were bottled up. And, a lot of our work was pushing this through. And I think the pandemic's kind of, opened it up, and now the genie is not going to go back in the bottle. I think good for all of us.
Great. Dr. Bali, I work with the visually impaired, and I often find that the technology that is available to them is so expensive, and it doesn't really help them, and especially the masses. How can we sort of make sure that technology is more accessible, which could support the visually impaired or the deaf or the disabled, especially in India? And what can we do to make it more accessible for them?
I think maybe Dr. Chesney might be the right person to answer that question. Would you like to take that? Because I think in India, a lot of people are working on these areas. I think we need a lot more investment from both the government as well as the private entrepreneurs, and that kind of nexus between the government and private enterprise has to come together and make this possible. So the policy and the technology has to kind of go hand in hand. So just to kind of my very little experience in building technology for people with disabilities is that I'm part of a committee of IEEE where we're looking at language standards, and one of the subgroups in that committee is accessibility. And there are. I wasn't aware, but as part of the committee, I became aware that there are these long lists of things that are required or are recommended. There are recommendations as well as even requirements, like mandatory requirements for technology. If it is going to be outwardly facing, consumer facing, then these are the things that you need to do in terms of accessibility. But the implementation is so low, and that's where I think the policy part has to come and play a big role. The government has to come and play a big role. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Chesney, it would be interesting to get your input on this as well.
So if I can piggyback on that, and in complete agreement with Dr. Bali, if you think about policy and innovators and technology coming together, okay, and there was, I think it's 25, 30 years old now, but there was this law, the set of laws that came into place in the United States called the Americans with Disabilities Act, okay, and I would venture to say that the two groups of people who were most pleased by that set of policies were, first, people with disabilities, because it gave them access to public buildings. And then I would say the second happiest group of people would probably be Otis elevators. All right, because what the Americans with Disabilities Act meant was that all buildings had to be accessible by a broad range of people. So Otis elevators, who happened to manufacture elevators, said, wow, this is great news for us too. So this was really a marriage of a great company that produces elevators and public policy that said our public buildings need to have elevators. And so I think it's again this marriage in between the two. It's the magic that happens when those two things come together.
So my next question is about breakthroughs. And what do you think going forward is going to be the next breakthrough in your field, and that would actually help us in creating an inclusive society, and that you hope to see or to work on?
So if I may.
Yes, sure.
Thank you. All right. So I think, look, a lot of these things seem like a non-starter for a long time. The truth is, a lot of change really looks like it's never going to happen, and it's dark for a very long time. And just to give you like some references, my first startup was in 1999, and I think none of us knew what internet it was, right? I mean, I think those are the days of dial-up modems, and like having a computer was a big win. Maybe 2,000 people shared a computer. And 5 years ago, when I started Shiro's, there were maybe 10 million women online, and I think still, we had bandwidth and we had a lot of this going on, but it hadn't become mass, right? And then if you look at last 5 years, the change has been so fast, right? We have built a digital payment stack. There's a social security stack, or at least there's a social security number now. There are frameworks for banking, like Aadhaar, Jan Dhan accounts, account aggregators. Now there's a common insurance stack being built. These are all things that help build a lot of change for a lot of, like, at least from where we see this, this might help us. So it took us 5 years to get from 1 million women to 20 million women. And our hope is that we will go from 20 million women to 100 million women in the next 3 years, right? So I think pace of change, I think the thing about technology is the first few years are really, really slow and full of failures. And you never, if you look at the first few computers, everything was so clunky for a really long time. And now I think the pace of change is like that. And I think we're seeing a huge amount of consumerization of technology, which means almost everyone will have some part of technology in their lives, which is very, very real, very, very connected to their daily lives, whether it's food or education or healthcare or a livelihood. And I think these are big triggers, and we've seen it in parts of LATAM. We've definitely seen it in China, and we hope that India gets to a point where a lot of basics are accelerated by technology. Healthcare, education, infrastructure, livelihoods. These are big themes, and I think we might be onto something. At least if we do these things right and make sure access continues to be easy for a large number of people, it's a possibility.
Dr. Bali?
Yeah, so I think we are living through paradigm change as far as my field is concerned. This is the time when everything's just changing for what we call natural language processing and speech technology, machine learning, huge models. I'm sure people who are following this would have read all about the GPT-3, which can just create human-like language out of nothing, etc. So we are kind of right now riding this wave. It's a very exciting time for the field. There are things that even 4 years back would not be possible that seem possible now, but it is also a time to kind of take a step back and think what's happening. What are these opportunities? What are we doing? And I think a lot of people, organizations, individuals, institutes have started thinking about the repercussions of this technological wave. How the so-called AI wave that we are having right now. Where does ethics fit into this? What are we doing to make sure that the technology remains inclusive and fair? How do we ensure that the people who are in society sociologically marginalized or discriminated against are not even more discriminated because of the use of technology? That's not what we want, right? So this is a very good time, I think, in the development of these models and these technologies, to sit back and think, where are we going with this? How are we doing this? Are we being equally fair? Is it equitable? Is this technology equitable, or are we just increasing the barriers and increasing the distance between the haves and the have-nots? So, good time to do that.
Yeah, I mean, talking from education space, we can see this disparity very, very clear. And I think India will have to pay a very heavy price for what is really happening right now, because there is no accessibility to almost 80% of children in India, which is a very, very huge number. So yes, we need to step back and see how to enable and how to get over this going forward. Dr. Chesney, just your take on breakthrough, the next big technology thing that would happen.
So I think that is a very, very excellent question. And my response is I have no idea. The metaphor that I use is when spaghetti is cooked, when you throw it against the refrigerator, and if the noodle sticks to the refrigerator, it's cooked. And if it falls down onto the ground, then it's not cooked. And I feel kind of the same way about technology. Is let's just try to use everything and let's see which of the noodles stick to the wall. Okay. So as an example, we just, and I look for the technology that I try to use is, kind of consumer based, low cost equipment. Okay.
Yeah.
So as an example, I just bought Amazon Prime Days were just a couple of days ago, and I ordered a couple of the new Echo Dots, the Amazon Echo Dots, to play around with. And the reason that I ordered those is I really think the applicability of those Echo Dots for somebody who's visually impaired is huge. I mean, clearly, having a voice controlled home, turn up the thermostat, turn on the lights, turn on the stereo, turn on the fan, and really the Echo Dot is a perfect device for somebody who's visually impaired. So that might be one of the noodles that sticks, but in terms of we're really pushing hard at our university using virtual reality and augmented reality right now. Okay. And I think it's cool. I mean, I really like it and I like playing with it. Whether it has long-term impact in a lot of different areas and whether it has long-term impact for people with accessibility, I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's one of those where maybe so, maybe not. We bought a few years ago when Google Glass first came out, right? I mean, we were all just abuzz with Google Glass and how to use Google Glass. So people were spending all kinds of grant money on Google Glass, and they were like $2,500 a pop. So they were very expensive equipment. And we never found any use models for Google Glass. It was like one of those things where it was one of those technologies that showed great promise. So we invested in it just to see, how we could make it work. And we never found any real use for it. Where again, this Echo Dot might work really well to wire up a house for somebody who's visually impaired to make their house completely accessible. So going back to the original question, I have no idea. But it's like, let's just look at this new technology. Let's look at potentially different types of disabilities and see where those might fit together.
Thank you. My other question is, what will be the future learning models once, whenever we are over with pandemic? We've become so dependent on, and kids have enjoyed actually, who have access to technology, enjoyed learning through, the technology, but they missed interaction with their teachers and professors. So what is your recommendations for educators? How to sort of build that there's a balance where there is interaction, yet there is support of technology. What would you suggest and what would be your take on that? Dr. Chesney.
It's a really good question. And I don't know. I think the pandemic is forever changing the way that we're going to educate our students. I really do. That this was forced upon us.
Yes.
And we are innovating and coming up with completely new approaches based upon this forced march of this new technology. And I think that some of the things that we've gained, how to use different cameras, how to find the microphone that works the best, what lectures to record, what lectures to deliver, asynchronously versus synchronously. And I think all of these things are valuable, but man, I miss my students in 3 dimensions. It's been 2-dimensional teaching for a while now. Yeah. And we're adapting, but I miss the 3-dimensional interaction. So I think there's little niblets that we're learning, and I really do think that those will help us in education long term. For the student who's sick at home, maybe who's sick at home for long term, and we still want to get the information to them, and want them to be educated. So I think there's niblets that we're learning along the way, and I think time will tell what really works out, but I for one, I can't wait to get back in the classroom.
Yeah, I get to hear that a lot. I know my children are just dying to go back to school and interact with their teachers. They miss that connect. Dr. Bali, the next question, I was just thinking, I know Microsoft has done so much work as far as, creating platforms for schools. What else is Microsoft thinking of, and especially in the field that you are in, to enable a better communication between the learners and the teacher?
So that's actually not my field. So my field is totally on the language side. Yeah. And on there, I think the things that we are kind of working on is how to, so currently there's this whole technology associated with deep learning, and there are these big models which allow you to kind of see earlier what the problem that we had in making technology rapidly for a lot of languages was that you had to have a lot of data for each language. And now, one of the things that in Microsoft and in other places around the world, in the technology world, that we are excited about is how we can, have this model which with very little data you can adapt to new languages. So it's not currently, it doesn't really work it's not a foolproof way to do it right now, but that's the exciting thing that we are kind of thinking about. But coming back to what you were asking, Dr. Chesney, I think in that though we are very excited about the technology and everything, but and it's been thrown at us, there it has also thrown up a lot of problems, especially for a country like India. My child and your children have access to the topmost technology. They can, and they are anxious to get back to school. But I know a lot of people like my helpers, kids, and all, who are actually doing their lessons in a phone this size, right?
Yeah.
And that's not a way to teach or learn, right? And then there are hundreds of thousands of other children who don't even have access to that phone, right? That form factor. So it's kind of thrown up these issues, and it's also kind of thrown up the issue of language, right? If you don't know English, most of these technology, the content, the access is available in English. What if you don't know English? How are you going to access? So these are the opportunities for people to kind of put their heads together and work to resolve these problems that cause these kind of barriers between different sections of society, is what I think. So I think like language is a big part in our country that disallows people to participate in this technology or whatever we are having right now.
Yeah. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying. I think, well, we have a new national policy which should be rolling out next year, which says that you can, at least in the elementary years, teach in the mother tongue and the language that the child understands. But I really don't know how that will also happen. But I totally understand the gap is only getting bigger. But just to one more question, because in India, that how do you make it affordable? Again, my question keeps coming back to this, because this is going to continue, and then we'll have a generation which won't have got educated. So it's how do you address, and how fast can it be addressed, is one of the bigger challenges.
So the thing, according to me, the thing is that it's not that expensive as we think it is, right? And with the newer, how does everyone have a phone now? How did everyone? How did we have this mobile phone explosion in India, right? And if people are able to watch movies and songs, etc., on their phones, we can definitely use the same infrastructure. To make it more access. It just needs a will. It needs a group of willing people. It needs a group of people who will support these people to make it happen. So I think the young are the answer. I think for example, we had a workshop for the Gondi thing. We were trying to brainstorm on what we should do that would help the Gondi community in terms of technology, right? And it was like with the community leaders and some NGO and everything, and we were brainstorming, and we had these young people who are our RFs and interns who are part of that workshop, and they were just participating, and they got so inspired by what was happening, what the Gondi community leaders were saying, that they went off and built an app that allowed them to access information in Gondi. They just hacked their way through it. So it's just the will. If you want to do it, the infrastructure right now, I believe everything is available for people to scale this.
Yeah. Just one of I think we have some students who are listening to you, and my last question was, what one piece of advice you would like to give these young scientists who are going to going to take on this journey of innovation. How can they use this technology, and what should be their way forward? A piece of advice from your journeys. Dr.
Okay,
Bharat.
I'll go first. So, uh, as technologists, and I say this every time, every place I'm asked to speak to young people, as technologists, we often forget. We get so excited about the coolness of technology and
Mm,
how lovely this is to play with, and these are
yes.
like just amazing toys and stuff. We forget the people we are building technology for. So whatever you do, remember who you're doing this for, right?
Mm,
And only then can a technology be truly useful, truly impactful, and make the change that you want it to make, right? So never forget who you're innovating for, who you're building for. So that's
That's
my
so
advice.
beautifully said. Thank you. That resonates with me as well, because when you work with community, you shouldn't just go there presuming what you think you want to give to them. Actually, they have to tell you what they want. So, so beautifully said. Thank you so much, Dr. Chesney. What would your be one piece of advice?
And this is in complete agreement with Dr. Bali, is make it personal. I mean, do something that matters to you, based upon people that you know, and again, piggybacking on what Dr. Bali just said, make the technology bend to the people you're trying to serve, rather than providing technology and say people adjust to this wonderful technology that I just provided to you. So, make it person first, and then figure out how the technology might work for those individual people.
Thank you. I mean, that was very inspirational. I mean, I have really enjoyed just listening to, I think Sairee has left, but the three of you. I hope the viewers have enjoyed it. And I think what you've said in the end actually sort of closes the session so beautifully, because it is about inclusion, it is about innovation, and it is the use of technology of this to make it inclusive and innovative. So thank you so much for taking out the time to be with us, to share your journeys, your insight. And I'm sure Plaksha is going to be in touch with you for many, many, many years. They're building a great university. And thank you so much for your time and you sharing your stories with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.